Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the co-founder and CEO with Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools. We have worked with life science companies for the last 14 years to help them with everything from digital advisory boards to virtual medical education to online investigator meetings. And since the launch of our award-winning Insight Events platform, we've also been helping pharmaceutical companies with their innovation hackathons, sales meetings, corporate events, and everything in between. But more importantly at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations that we have with some of the leading edge thinkers, digital provocateurs, and healthcare thought leaders, we can all work together to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm really excited to having one of these thought leaders at the table with me today. This is actually Caitlin Wagner. She's actually a senior marketing professional specializing in brand strategy in rare and complex disease markets. She has won industry-wide recognition for her innovative digital patient engagement and mobile app strategies. Known as a proactive individual who anticipates change and embraces a flexible and cooperative cross-functional approach, she has successfully driven business results through a 360-degree tactical approach for both healthcare practitioners and patient markets. She is currently the Associate Marketing Director at a company called Pharma. There she has recently helped to develop and launch the RuConnect app to provide a convenient way to track swelling and to share reports with hereditary angioedema, or HAE, patients' healthcare teams. Welcome, Caitlin. So happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that very kind, glowing introduction.
Absolutely. So really amazing background that you have, and obviously have done a lot of things in pharma. I was wondering if you could just quickly share with the audience what has brought you here today, and tell us a little bit about your career trajectory.
Yeah, of course. It's a little interesting. Some people are often surprised that I came to marketing not from a sales background. I think a typical trajectory for pharmaceutical marketing is that you carry the bag first, but I actually came from a background in analytics. So for several years before I came to pharmaceutical marketing, I was actually working in claims and analytics data, forecasting, making projections, analyzing historical data to kind of see how people's choices out in the real world were impacting and infecting policy changes. And then after that, we moved on to how people's changes and activities were impacting growth and profit margins. And all of that was wonderful. I learned to code. I learned how to work with the data in a way that really helped you shape how I look at our marketing strategies today. So I was really enjoying that analytics, but was looking for a way to apply it to, to real people. How can I use this data skill that I have to help improve communications, to help people who in a more tangible, direct way, as opposed to looking backwards. I wanted to be able to look forward. So when I found the opportunity to come and work at Pharming Healthcare, it was a really wonderful time because they were looking for a person to fill a dual role. So we were such a small startup company back in 2017. So I came on as an analyst and a marketeer. And so I was able to kind of, fuse those two passions into one. And very quickly, we realized that we had so much work to do at Pharming that I transitioned into my full-time marketing role therein and helped to relaunch our brand for hereditary angioedema.
So let's dig a little bit into that, because you've done some really interesting digital things there. And as we know, this is kind of changing the world, and a lot of what pharma is doing is you're going through digital transformation and digitizing a lot of things. So tell us a little bit about the HAA type of patient and why sort of they were the perfect type of patient who could really use the RuConnect app, and what exactly you were what problems were you trying to solve there?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the specific challenges for rare disease and for people who live with hereditary angioedema is that it is so rare. So the incidence is about 1 in 50,000. There are maybe 8 to 10,000 patients in all of America who live with HAE. So a challenge for them is really finding one another and finding the resources and finding clinicians that know about HAE, even at all. So one of the challenges, as you know, that we started experiencing in 2020 was we weren't able to get together, in real life. But this had been a problem for HAE from the very beginning. All the patients were so spread out from one another. So even from the beginning, we had to be mindful of what can we do to foster community online? What can we do to make sure that patients have all the resources that they need at their fingertips rather than having it be spread out across the ethos? So specifically for the RUCONEST app, it aimed to combat, let's say, I'll pick 3 of the main challenges. One was awareness and education. For HAE is a disease where a patient may have a sudden episode of swelling. Their hand or even their throat or their stomach can swell without warning, and they have to, if they don't have an appropriate medicine, or even if they do sometimes, rush to the ER. They may get there, and the person in the ER has never heard of HAE. They may see they've swollen and think, oh, well, this must be an allergic reaction. But antihistamines won't solve this problem. So we needed to create a way for the patient to, in the moment, tell the ER this is what's going on, to give them something credible that the ER wouldn't ignore. So we put in there a secure place for people to store their lab values, letters from their doctor. Another challenge that patients face with HAE is that these episodes of swelling happen at any moment, at any time, without any kind of regularity. So patients needed a way to track their HAE attacks over a long period of time so they could share an accurate history with their doctors. So one of the really cool things that we did with this app, hadn't been done before, is we created a secure, totally HIPAA compliant way for patients to store the incidences of their HAE attacks in a way, and they could even upload pictures. They could say where on their body it was. All of that could be stored, and then a report could be generated so that they could safely and securely share with their physician to keep them in the loop, right? Because when you only see your doctor once a year, you might not remember every single thing that happened to you over that time. And the third thing that we did was just to make sure we had a library, a database of comprehensive information and videos to educate themselves, their family members, whomever, about what it's like to live with HAE.
So this is fascinating and super amazing that we can now start providing these kinds of much needed services to people with these incredibly rare disorders and conditions. But I do want to kind of backtrack a little bit about this in terms of when you're first getting diagnosed. Here I am living in the world, living in the community. I'm getting these weird episodes of swelling. I have no idea what I'm doing. How do I ever get to the RUCONEST app? How do I ever find out what that initial diagnosis is? So how are you trying to, or how did you try to leverage the app or even education for the person like myself that I had no idea what was going on with me?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We really needed to take a full 360 approach, right? Because you don't know where somebody's going to go first to look for information. So we had a very robust boots on the ground. Our sales reps doing education, handing out like, hey, this is a resource that you can tell your patients about. We incorporated a video explanation into our educational speaker programs. But I think more than anything else, we leveraged our digital campaigns to spread the word. We had an email series specifically letting people know, like, hey, if you have a loved one, if you yourself have a new diagnosis, we used SEO and paid search. People were searching for unexplained swelling, if you were searching for HAE, if they were searching for the advocacy organizations to say, hey, look, if this is something that you're affected by, check out this resource for you. And in that way, we were able to direct people to the HAE and Me app. the nice thing about the app is that pretty early on, we got feedback from the HAE community that the app was at first just for root canal patients, but we learned really early on, lots of patients were coming up to us and saying, hey, this app is great for everybody. And we listened to that. We rebranded it just to be the HAE and me, and opened it to everybody to use for a resource. So anybody can go to the App Store and download it to benefit from it. So to answer your question, we use email, we use SEO, and we also made sure to work with our patient resources. We created some videos, some patient testimonials of people who use the app, and launched those on Facebook and on Instagram to help spread the word.
I was actually just curious in this world as we started, getting into this world of apps, and I was actually just curious if there was certain kinds of metrics that you use to determine the success of the app. So for example, did you over time decrease the time to diagnosis or treatment delivery or sustainment or management of conditions? Are there certain metrics or evaluations that we're using on these kinds of tactics, specifically these apps?
So what we're able to do, so as I said before, all the data that's collected from the app is HIPAA compliant, it's secure, and all data is de-identified and only ever seen in the aggregate. We're never going to see patient level data. But what we are able to see is we can see over time how often the app is being logged into. We can see over time how frequently people are logging their attacks, but we can also just see how often that people watch a video or export a report, or just in that way we can see that the usership is increasing over time. We can see that the downloads are increasing over time. Because usually if you launch something and if you launch it well, you get a big bolus up front, and then everyone has it, and either they don't use it or there are no people left to use your app. But we're able to see that as time went on, not only did we get more people who are on our therapy using the app, but people who are also not on our therapy are also using this app, just because it's a useful tool for them. So yeah, we are able to see those metrics, and we can see what kind of notifications people do click on, which ones they don't use so much, and we're able to kind of tune the resources appropriately just from data collection. But I think not more valuable, but another way that we do that is we have frequent or we have intermittent advisory boards where we can talk to people who use the app, hear what they like, hear what would improve it for them. And I think that kind of human qualitative touch base has been integral for the app success.
100%. And so it's really neat to see that you've been engaging with patients digitally through some of these virtual advisory boards and what have you. COVID-19 has also changed the world and sort of turned everything upside down. And clinical trials, for example, have in some ways, a lot of them just stopped in their tracks. I think there's been a huge reevaluation of decentralizing clinical trials. And there's been a huge focus on patient centricity and making the patient the center of everything that's happening, including clinical trials. I'm curious about where the app, or has the app evolved into something that is accommodating some of these needs, especially with the HAE patients around clinical trials, for example?
So no, we're not using the app for clinical trials, but I definitely could see how there is potential for that to be a useful tool in the future. If you can't have a patient come into a trial center, every week, every month, however frequently, to give a report, you could either have that app be a facilitation for a Zoom consult. You could have the app be a facilitator for filling out a survey. And I think that could certainly be a tool that could be very helpful.
And also just sort of moving forward as we started to see this evolution in the utilization of telehealth, telemedicine, physicians having to see their patients using these kind of virtual hubs. What are you sort of seeing, or potentially the effect that telemedicine is going to have on, for example, HAE patients and how they're diagnosing or managing their condition? Is there changes that you've seen since the increased utilization of telemedicine?
Yeah, so also one of the things about patients who live with HAE is that they're only able to often see their allergist, or their allergist immunologist only see them maybe once or twice a year. The condition is very rare. The number of people that specialize in treating HAE obviously is not as large as a more common illness. So the uptake of telemedicine has certainly made it easier for physicians to check in with their patients. Rather than having to drive 3 hours to a center of excellence or an academic institution, patients are able to connect with their physicians, from their kitchen, which is just fabulous, and I think has really made it easier for physicians and patients to partner to better manage their care, which has just been fantastic.
Absolutely, and always to the advantage of patients at the end of the day. Now, I was also just curious around, physicians using electronic medical records, and they have their own portals, and they're going in and out to access patient information, et cetera. Where do you sort of see the future of apps and information that's coming from these other sorts of tools and having them interoperable with the standard portals or medical, or electronic health records the physicians are already using on a day-to-day basis?
That's a really big challenge. I've had a lot of conversations with physicians about, would you like a physician version of an HAE and Me app? Would you like to be able to log in and see your patient's data? And I've had physicians recommend to me, hey, could you get this app integrated with my health record system? And we get a lot of different reactions from all different kinds of physicians. Some physicians really want that information. Some physicians like, well, what if you email me this report and I don't get to it in time, and I'm not able to see in a timely fashion that a patient logged a swell that affected their throat? And they're not, when the physician said, well, I would in that instance prefer the patient just call me because that's an emergency and I want to know about that right away. So there's still a lot of debate to be had about the best way to get the physicians this information in a way that doesn't overwhelm them, but also allows them to be the most up to date on where their patients are in their journeys. I think that the solution might be to integrate it with the physician's, that physician's practice of service. But in order to do that right now, the approach would be to contract with that physician's particular platform. There are hundreds of them all over America. So that really would be an undertaking. I think you would need like an app company that has partnerships with all of them, because I couldn't imagine every single pharmaceutical company trying to contract with every single different health system. But I don't want to get too into the weeds, but I've thought about this a lot. It would be great if we could integrate it. But it's certainly, that's a really large technological challenge for us right now.
Yeah, like the interoperability is a whole other conversation. It's
exactly.
It's huge. So I'm also just thinking about this whole world that we're in right now around machine learning, artificial intelligence, taking data, population data, and integrating it into these smart algorithms and helping to do things like population health management, what have you. What does this look like in the future with these kinds of apps?
Yeah, I think it's really cool. There's a lot of stuff that we can do and a lot of stuff that we don't know if we should do, right? So, for example, there are some really great apps for that companies have, not pharmaceutical companies, but they're like the Flow menstrual tracker. Right. If you put in your data, it will give you a recommendation that says, oh, hey, based on your history, you could be experiencing cramps in the next 3 days. Make sure you put on a hot water bottle, or make sure you've stocked up on ibuprofen, whatever it might be. But and so we've thought about and looked into what could be a helpful thing for us to do. We could look at the data and say, hey, you usually say that that a trigger for your HAE attack was stress. So, maybe build in some time for taking a walk, or, a mental health break, or But in order for us to provide that recommendation, we would obviously need, to take that through a partnership with our regulatory, medical, and legal review committee, and we would need to have published papers that supported that going for a mental health break, taking a walk, could lower your stress levels, and that would in turn perhaps, make your HAE attack less. And you could see how that would be very challenging. Like that doesn't exist, so we would never say that. So I think when it comes to future costing and using AI algorithms to kind of, further the management, I think we have to be really careful there. One, to consider what research is out, but also what is our place, right? I don't think that I personally would want to, infringe or step upon the toes of the physician who's managing that patient's care. So I think that's kind of, it would have to be through a strong partnership with a consortium of physicians, I think.
Yeah, it's a really complicated issue, and it can get really prickly in a lot of different ways if you let it. I'm also just curious as well too. We're talking about the various partners and people who are going to be involved with this, and I'm just thinking about how patients are going to be navigating and figuring out what it is that they need and don't need. I'm just wondering if, for example, a lot of people are doing genetic testing and they're going to 23andMe and, they're getting their DNA and what have you. I'm curious if, integrating, and you were talking earlier about partnering with a company like that and integrating that and then making it anonymous, and of course, anonymizing, and it's all just sort of aggregate and large data. Could anybody leverage that? I mean, it's not necessarily doing a clinical trial per se, but leveraging the basic data sets in there to do research. What is the future of these kinds of things?
It's really interesting that you asked me that question. So I'm working on a brand. I'm working on a brand that's in its phase 3 clinical trial, and for an even more rare disease. So the new brand that I'm working on, the incidence for patients who have APDS is about it's 1 or 2 persons per million, right? It's very rare, and you can only diagnose this disease by genetic test. And if you do, there are 2 specific genes that could cause you to have APDS, which is a primary immunodeficiency disease. And this disease was only discovered in 2013, so it's very new. And there are specific variants on a gene that indicate it, we know for a fact, if you have these variants on this gene, then that's APDS. But there are many other variants for which there is an unknown significance. So, they could be something that causes APDS, and it could be something that doesn't. And we just don't have the amount of data to know yet. So if a patient was recommended by their doctor to have a genetic test, maybe it's through a company, well, it would have to be through a company, but and they take their genetic test, they do have a variant on that gene, but they don't know but it could be a variant of unknown significance, a VUS. When patients, take that test, that data is stored. And the physicians would say, look, you have this VUS. We don't know enough yet to say if it could be causing the problems you're experiencing or not. If enough patients take this test and enough patients have that same variant, we're able to then, scientists and doctors are able then to determine that this is a variant of significance. And then the doctor can definitively say, this variant on your gene is causing you to have this disease. So the answer is yes, these genetic tests can be used for, for academic research and can further our understanding of the diseases. And it's remarkable. It's great.
It's a really interesting world, Caitlin, that we're living in, because, we come from the world of the traditional pharmaceutical company, which has really traditionally been manufacturing chemical entities. Now we start getting into biologics and small molecules and what have you. So we're obviously moving ahead. And then the marketing, the manufacturing of these, and then sales and marketing. Suddenly we're in a world now where you're getting general consumer electronic companies coming in You're starting to see now, software as medical devices, and there's this world is changing. What are some of your anticipated views on where pharma might be evolving as we start to see more consumer electronics and these software as becoming entities that are treating and solving some of these interesting conditions?
I think that it's very exciting, right? Like we want to, it's exciting that we can now use technology to hopefully improve patient care. I want to be cautious about saying that, a technology can improve a patient outcome. But we have the power to run these products through clinical trials now and to find out if they can indeed, improve patient outcomes. I think that in the future, pharmaceutical companies are going to have to, at the onset, at the beginning stages, when we're in our preclinicals, in our phase ones, we're going to have to be thinking about, okay, well, what does our mechanism of delivery look like? At those beginning stages, be communicating with patients, with physicians, with the advocacy groups to think about not only like, does this compound work, but how is it going to work? And how can we work with these communities to figure out what's going to work best in their lives, and how can we leverage the tech that's out there to make it easier for the patients, make it more, maybe make gene therapy more like easy to take on board, make it easier for a person to intake their insulin. I think too often, we have worked in silos of like, let's just find the science that works. But we need to branch out and think, okay, we think this science might work. What tech could we pair it with at these early stages so that these things can move together? And so not only can we get something that's easy for patients to use, but can also get it to them in a timely fashion, right? Because there's nothing more frustrating than thinking, oh, I've got a medicine that could really help patients, but I have to wait an extra 10 years now because I have to work on a mechanism of delivery that, that works for a patient, or you put a medicine out there and patients don't want to use it because the mechanism, it hurts them or it's inconvenient, and then you have to wait for the updates to come. I think being more collaborative at the start with tech companies, being open to it, and bringing regulatory and legal in these beginning stages are going to be critical for us to making your question a feasible reality.
I think it's brilliant, and on top of that, you mentioned something that's really important, which is this whole, not legacy, but standard protocols on how we do pharma. Phase 3, phase 2, phase 1, the sort of time periods we're doing these with patients. It's just the way we do things. It's the way we discover. It's the way we do clinical research. Now enter things like clinical trials in silico, smart algorithms, all kinds of other technologies, or even things like in tissue in situ, or creating these 3D printed organs and tissues and blood vessels. And do you see this accelerating and changing the way we do pharma, the way we do clinical research, could this eventually, for example, replace patients and be able to identify and discover new medications quicker, faster, more robustly? What's your thoughts there, Caitlin?
I really hope that it enables us to progress more quickly. I really hope that the scientists in the lab are not just going to conferences on molecules, but are also going to conferences on technology and methods of delivery. I sure hope that we don't replace the patients when we're thinking about developing these products, though. I think what you're trying to say is like, could we develop a drug without ever giving it to a person? Like, that could be cool, but I don't ever want us to get away from this. Medicine is for patients, and we need to not only be thinking, how is this medicine going to help a patient with their illness, but how is that treatment going to affect them, right? I want that to always, or maybe even become even more the focus, the center of the development of medicine than it has been, to today.
Absolutely. Exciting times and kind of scary. Hopefully this is, we're looking at this from a positive standpoint because there's all different angles, but very, very interesting, accelerating times. There's a groundswell of energy and momentum. And so we're just gonna ride the wave. Thank you so much for your time, Caitlin. This was a fascinating conversation. For anybody who's interested in connecting with Caitlin or learning more about what farming does, please take a look for her contact details in the show notes below. If you also enjoyed this conversation, check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of things that we do with physicians, payers, allied healthcare providers, patients. We bring people together in a series of touch points, asynchronously and synchronously through the Impetus Insight platform, so that we can work together, develop new protocols, ideas, gather insights, move the momentum on new products and how you're going to be launching it, and reimbursement and plans and marketing. These are the kinds of things we do all the time at Impetus, so check it out. Please like and subscribe to our channel, and we'd love if you can leave us some feedback on iTunes as well. Thanks everybody for your time, and thank you as well, Caitlin, for a wonderful conversation.